Hello, just making a really brief video. Uh, um, gosh, I left a message for a senator just a little while ago. It took me a while to figure out what committee it was on, um, and then because I had received his newsletter, that James Langsford actually is his name, from Oklahoma, and I gave him some information about the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, which is located or was located in his state, um, in Oklahoma City. It, you can look at my previous videos where I talk about how the Oklahoma City, the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City was bombed by the FBI and ATF April 19th using micronuclear devices. That information is on page 39 of my FBI file that I uploaded to Google Drive and made available for people. So I gave that information to Senator Langford. The reason I wanted to make this video, I think I could have made a blog post. Maybe I'll make a blog post later. Um, Sorry if you're not looking at the camera. Yeah, I just happened to notice when I was looking at the Senate Intelligence Committee members that Senator Feinstein is a member. And in addition to contacting the Senate Intelligence Committee, I contacted the Senate Judiciary Committee members as well about 2 weeks ago. And I gave them all a letter about my experience having spent time in prison and getting subjected to psychotropic drug injections um, because of the orders of Federal District Judge Michael Mossman here in Portland, Oregon. So Feinstein is on the Senate Intelligence Committee and on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Um, I don't know if anyone here has read Christopher Boland's book, Solving 9/11, the original articles, or his other book. I have his other book here. Uh, I can't read it. What does it say? The War on Terror: The Plot to Rule the Middle East. So you can buy this off of Christopher Boland's website, and then let's see if I can get his other book here. I wasn't prepared to show you these books. Um, this is his other book. This is the first one that I bought. It's called Solving 9/11, the original articles. In the book here and in the other one, Christopher writes extensively about how it was the Jews, the Zionists, terrorists, that caused 9/11, that knocked down the World Trade Center using, he mentions nanothermite. Flight 93 landed in Cleveland. That information was included in the email that I sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee members as well as the White House. Um, but Christopher Boland's book has a lot of really good information. If you go to Christopher's website, you can get both books from him for $50. What I did um, is I watched a video with Christopher and Sean Stone. The video was posted on Facebook by Alfred Weber. Alfred is works with Andrew Basiago on ProjectMars.net. Andy's running for president of the United States, and Alfred works alongside Andy. Alfred is a Yale-educated lawyer. Um, so Alfred had posted this video with Sean Stone interviewing Christopher Boland, and I watched it, and I thought it was a really good interview. Sean Stone is the son of Oliver Stone, a film director. And after I watched the video, I went to Amazon.com and I bought the Solving 9/11 book. I got that book. I kind of paged through it, read some of the articles. Then I went to Christopher's website. I think it's ChristopherBoland.com. and I donated $50 to him. He emailed me back and said, for the $50, you get 2 books. And I told him I'll just keep it, keep the money, because I already had 1 book. And then later on that day, a couple hours after I had made the donation, I thought I would like to get the second book. So I went to his website and I bought the second book from his website. It was cheaper than getting it through Amazon. So I now have both of Christopher's books. And it's really great. I mean, it's full of information. It talks a lot about, you know, how this was planned for many, many years. It mentions a lot of people that were involved in covering it up, people such as Michael Chertoff. Michael Chertoff is an Israeli national. His mother used to work on missions for Mossad. Michael is the reason that 9/11 was never investigated. He's a high-powered lawyer. He was the second director of Homeland Security. And it's absurd that an Israeli national would become the director of Homeland Security for the United States of America. And on page 93 of this book, is information about Flight 93. I thought that was pretty interesting. I commented to Christopher about it in an email. Page 93 has information about Flight 93. Another thing I thought was really cool is in the front of the book, there's a quote. If I can find it. Here it is. I could get it for you to see. I don't know if you can see it. It's a quote by a guy named Mike Lowe, a man named Mike Lowe. And it was taken from an article in the Boston Globe on December 15th, 2008. December 15th is my birthday. James Comey, the former director of the FBI, his birthday is December 14th. And December 14th was the day of the event in Sandy Hook where no one was killed. December 14th, 2012. That's kind of interesting. But I think also December 15th was the date that the First Amendment was ratified, the right to freedom of speech and things like that. This video is getting kind of long. It's going to take a while to upload. It's at 8 minutes. I don't know what else to talk about. Feinstein really needs to get out of office. I mean, I called her office so many times and informed them that no one was killed at Sandy Hook, and her office assistants would always insist that those kids were killed. Well, okay, that was like almost 6 years ago. It'll be 6 years ago, December 14th of this year. This is 2018, and it occurred in 2012. But her office was insistent that those kids were killed. I told them over and over and over again. Feinstein is old. She's an old woman. She needs to leave. Those kids, I believe, are missing. No one was killed, because the school was closed. We know the school was closed because we have records, lots of records. One of the records we have is the delivery manifests of Cisco and Dean Foods, where they were delivering food and milk to 375 Fan Hill Road in Monroe, Connecticut, not to 12 Dickinson Drive in Newtown, which is the location of Sandy Hook Elementary School. The reason they didn't deliver anything there was because the school was closed. I haven't heard any response from Lenny Posner. I don't know how to say his name. There was an article in a magazine several years ago where he said that he drove his 3 children, Sophia, Ariel, and Noah, to Sandy Hook Elementary School on December 14th and dropped them off. I don't know why he would do that. I had some Twitter posts, and I used a hashtag HONR, which is an organization that Lenny formed. And I've never received a response back. Why would he drop his kids off at the school if the school was closed? I reported Cisco and Dean Foods to the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, because both companies are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And then I contacted various bar associations across the United States, American Bar Association, I think. I'm losing track of the agencies and things that I contact. But I tried to contact a lot of people. I don't hear back from a lot of them. It wasn't until just like a couple of days ago that I contacted my local newspaper, which is the Oregonian. The Oregonian is owned by a company called Advanced Publications, which is in New York. And the owner of the company, I think his name is Stephen Newhouse. And it was, I think his father was S.I. Newhouse. And I had contacted his assistant, S.I. Newhouse's assistant, many, many times. That office is located on Staten Island in New York. And I would speak with S.I. Newhouse's assistant. And I told her many times, I gave her lots of information, I faxed her documents, mailed her documents, called her multiple times, and told them that no one was killed. I was interested, because the Newhouse people are Jewish, and I had heard that there was only one Jewish child in the group, that was Noah Posner. He was also said to have been the youngest child. And I was telling them, no one was killed when I would contact the Advanced Publications newspaper. Advanced Publications, like I mentioned, owns the Oregonian here in Portland, Oregon. They own a lot of other newspapers and magazines. Well, no one ever did anything. There was nothing ever published. It's 2018. Like I said, almost 6 years now since the event. And still nothing. But when I contacted the Oregonian a few days ago, I emailed the editor and I gave her a copy of a letter that I sent to every member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, all 21 members, a couple of weeks ago. That's posted on my blog at kevinperfield.com. And in that letter, it talks about no shooting in Newtown, because the Sandy Hook School was closed. It also talks about Flight 93 landing in Cleveland, Ohio on September 11, 2001. The passengers went into the NASA hangar where they were interviewed by the FBI. Robert Mueller was director of the FBI on September 11, 2001. So he would have been aware of that his agents had gone in and interviewed the passengers of Flight 93. And none of this was ever published anywhere, whatever. I was sentenced to 30 years. I'm getting mixed up here. I was sentenced to 30 days additional time in federal prison and told I was to receive psychotropic drug injections for several years while I was on federal probation. I included the name of my federal probation officer, Matthew Pruitt, who was also, I don't know if he still is, because I reported him to his boss at the Portland Community College. I think his name was, I'm not going to give his name out, but I reported Matt to his boss because Matt was an instructor in criminal justice at the Portland Community College. And I wanted his boss to know what Matt had done, because I had told Matt over the course of 3 years while I was working with him on my federal probation, I told him many, many times that no one was killed in Newtown. And he just ignored me. In fact, he presented it to the judge just before I was sentenced to 30 additional days in federal prison, and told I needed to get the injections of the psychotropic drugs. I don't know what else to talk about. Anyways, I want to encourage you guys, talking a lot about things that I've done. I want to encourage you to contact your representatives in your state, and also people that are not in your state. And you know, if you have a message to give to them, to contact them and let them know, you can visit their websites and leave them voice messages. You can talk to their staff. You can email them. You can. A lot of them have Twitter accounts. You can send messages to them through Twitter. A lot of them have Facebook accounts. Um, I was harassed by the FBI over a period of several years, and in my FBI file that I uploaded to the internet, which you can find on my blog, I'm repeatedly referred to as being delusional and mentally ill by the FBI. I'm they're the ones that sent the Portland police out to have me arrested. I think it was April 10th of 2013. They said that I was calling and harassing people in Newtown, the victims of the shooting, but there was no shooting because the school was closed. I knew that, but the FBI didn't know that for some reason, and the Portland police didn't know that. I couldn't get a fair trial in Portland, Oregon, because all of the judges, even the lawyers that represented me, and the prosecuting attorneys, and even the news media all believed that someone was killed, that the kids were killed. I'm the only one that seemed to have known that no one was killed, so I couldn't get a fair trial. The police detective, his name is Tony Harris. Him and two other detectives, an overweight male, and then there was a female named Pam. They jumped over the fence where I was living. They told me this. Tony told me this. Tony, the detective, when they arrived, they knocked on the door of the apartment where I was living. I had been on the phone with Rabbi Shaul Praver in Newtown. I was talking to him, and the detectives knocked on my door, and I ended the conversation with Praver, went to the door, and I was surprised to see these people standing there with guns. And I said to them, "Don't you need a search warrant?" And Detective Harris said that he was in charge. And then the second detective, the overweight man, said that if they had to get a search warrant, they were going to come back and break every window in my house and drag me out and take me to jail. It was at that time that I agreed to meet with them at a Starbucks that was nearby the next day. I agreed to meet with them at 9:30 a.m. That information is in my FBI report. If you search through it, you'll see that I wrote about that, and the FBI did not redact any of that information. Gosh, I'm coming up on 18 minutes now. That Portland police detective, Tony Harris, did not meet with me at Starbucks the next day. I had told him I wanted to sit outside. I didn't want to go in the Starbucks because I really didn't like the people that gathered at that Starbucks. I said I didn't want to go in there and be in that crowd. But I did tell him that I would meet him outside, and I did meet him out. I did not meet him outside. I went outside. I sat in a bench. I sat on a bench outside of the Starbucks, and I sat there from 9:20 until 9:50. The agreement was to meet at 9:30 a.m. The next day, I was arrested coming out of a store. There's a grocery store named Fred Meyer's, and I came out of the Fred Meyer's store with a cup of coffee because there was a Starbucks inside the store. And a car drove up, and Tony Harris was behind the wheel. Pam and the overweight man, the other detective, came running towards me, handcuffed me. I remember Harris approached me, and there was this horrible smell, and I told him he smelled. And then they called a patrol car, and I was put in the back of the patrol car and driven downtown to the Portland Police Bureau. I was taken up onto the 13th floor and placed in a room that had stainless steel walls. There were no vents. I couldn't breathe. I remember pounding on the walls, telling them to let me out. that fat detective opened up the door, let me get some air, and then Tony Harris came by, and I remember him glaring at me. They took me out of the room. At no point was I ever read my Miranda rights. I was taken into an interrogation room. There was an older detective that sat there. I remember him saying to me, "You're not allowed to smoke in the building." And I told him, I don't smoke. He was a smoker. I could tell he was a smoker. That he smoked cigarettes. And then I remember being interrogated by the detectives. They were asking me if I had emailed anyone, and they were asking me about my email addresses and asking me to verify my email addresses, and asked me if I had called people in Newtown and also Aurora. They asked me if I had contacted the brother of one of the women that was reported to have been killed in the Aurora theater shooting, July 20th, 2012. And I was then taken downstairs and booked and placed in jail. I remember the sheriff deputies telling me I would be out the next day. The next day I went to arraignment. I learned at arraignment that my bail had been increased from $10,000 to $100,000. And the Portland police detective Tony Harris had informed, I guess he informed the DA's office, it would be the DA's office that was prosecuting me. He informed them that I was not cooperating with police. I had told Detective Harris many times during our conversation that no one was killed in Newtown and no one was killed in Aurora. I also gave him information about Flight 93 landing in Cleveland, Ohio on September 11th. But he ignored all that, told the district attorney's office I wasn't cooperating with police. I think that's the reason why my bail was increased from $10,000 to $100,000. And then I spent the following 2 months in jail, where I was abused by a deputy, Rodney Schaefer, and then there was a Lieutenant Penna that worked for the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department. There was a third deputy, but I can't remember what his name was. They took me out into a hallway where I was abused. I was so scared, I felt pressured to take a guilty plea. Judge Leslie Roberts was my judge, and I took a guilty plea. My attorney was a man named Richard Morgan. He was just an absolutely horrible attorney. I remember when he spoke with me in the jail, there was a glass partition, and he looked at me like I was crazy, and he said, "You believe there's people on the moon?" I do believe there's people on the moon. I know there's people on the moon. I have a lot of information that there's lots of bases up on the moon. I was just chatting earlier today with Anthony Zender, and he was telling me that he's been up to the moon. There's, I think he said, some really beautiful blonde women Nazis. I guess they're part of, I think they're maybe part of the Fourth Reich. And he was going through orientation. This is Anthony Zender. And then Kevin Trammell from Canada, he talks about in his videos being taken to the moon. He was picked up by a TR-3 and in Ontario. He lived in Ontario, Canada. He was picked up by a TR-3B, taken off to Antarctica. I believe he was checked, underwent a health check, then went up to Moon for orientation, and then off to Mars for training. I didn't know Kevin or Anthony back then in 2013, but I did know from having spoken with Philip Corso Jr. that there was Project Horizon, a moon base. I know from having spoken with Dr. Bill Deagle that there was a moon base. Bill Deagle is the doctor that did the exit examination on the military bomb forensic team from Fort Carson that went out to Oklahoma to remove the bombs that were remaining inside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. This occurred in 1995. Um, so yeah, I think Bill Deagle was actually the first person to tell me about the moon base, I believe. And then Phil Corso Jr. told me in 2010, when I spoke with him on the phone in October of 2010, he told me about Project Horizon because he had seen the plans for Project Horizon when he was a young boy. In his father's office, there were plans for Project Horizon. Um, I was just reading a book by William Mills Tompkins. I want to encourage you to take a look at that book where William Mills Tompkins describes building absolutely enormous intergalactic spaceships for the Navy back in the 1950s. Kevin Trammell talks about a U.S. Navy program, in a secret space program called Solar Warden. Um, I don't know if President Trump will mention any of that on November 10th. I've heard that on November 10th, it was actually Anthony Zender that told me this. November 10th, Donald Trump is going to have a military parade and introduce Space Force, a new branch of the United States military. But we have Solar Warden that's been up in space for a long time. I'm not sure exactly how many years, but Solar Warden's up there, and that's part of the United States Navy. But none of this was brought up when I was arrested back in 2013. No one bothered to ask me any questions. My attorney gave me very poor representation. My picture was broadcasted on television. In fact, a local television station, KOIN, still has videos of me. If you do a YouTube search, you'll find a video of me from 2013 that's on the Coin channel, KOIN channel 6. They never took it down. And then there were articles that were written about me in the Oregonian, that paper I mentioned that I had emailed a couple of days ago. I emailed them the letter that I sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee members. So I got really bad representation. I was forced into taking a guilty plea, and then I was sentenced to a year in mental health court under Judge Tom Ryan, and it was terrible. I couldn't stand going in there every week. Every week you wonder whether you're going to be put back into jail because you're not following the judge's instructions. It is the worst. And then I had a man that was a supervisor for the mental health court. I can't remember his last name. His first name was Tim. And he's the one that told me to remove my YouTube videos. I had at one time 360 or 370 YouTube videos. The FBI talks about that in my FBI report. If you read my FBI report that I posted, the FBI writes about me having 370 YouTube videos. The FBI refers to my discussions about outer space and teleportation and Mars and so forth. They refer to it as science fiction and delusional thinking, and that's why the FBI was continually contacting the Portland Police Department to come out and arrest me. On October 19th, 2012, I was handcuffed by Officer John Hurlman at the Sports Authority store in Cascade Station Shopping Center. I read Hurlman's report because it's included in the FBI file that I posted online, and he is just a blatant liar. He seems to believe that he and I carried on some type of a conversation in the store, but that never occurred. I don't know where he got his information. Maybe he was watching the YouTube videos that I had posted before he decided to come out and arrest me, because he seemed to know a lot about me and the subject matters that I was talking about. I'm pretty sure he had probably watched my YouTube videos before he came out and arrested me. But he's a liar, and the report that he wrote up is just uh, an awful fabrication of the events of that day. He was very cruel. I remember Hurlman handcuffing me along with an officer, Martin Padilla, who I believe is now a sergeant on the Portland Police Department. Uh, Hurlman no longer works for the Portland PD. He got suspended a while back for making some derogatory statements about the Black Lives Matter protest. He had to work that protest, a protest here in Portland, Oregon for Black Lives Matter, and he had made a Twitter comment about them being a bunch of fools. And that was written about in newspapers across the country. And then he was suspended. And then at some point he quit or retired from the Portland Police Department. He works for the Department of Parks and Recreations here in Portland, Oregon now. He's a fat man. I didn't used to be this overweight. I used to be a lot thinner. I've gained an enormous amount of weight, particularly since I was put on psychotropic drugs that were that I was told I needed to take by Judge Michael Mossman, federal district judge, chief judge, actually. And I gained about 100 pounds in 4 years because of those drugs. And I also gained a lot of weight after I was arrested by Hurlman on October 19th, 2012. When I was arrested, I was alone. I wasn't bothering anyone. I was in the shoe department of the Sports Authority store in Cascade Station. That store is gone now. They closed down that location. And I was looking for running shoes because I wanted to run marathons. And after my arrest, I gained a lot of weight. And that was October 19th. And then in April 10th, 2013, I was arrested again. That was by Tony Harris. And I was put in jail for 2 months. And I gained a lot of weight after that. Let me think. I'm kind of losing track. But a lot of this was that these arrests occurred because the FBI was contacting the local police department and telling them to come after me because I was making phone calls to Newtown, Connecticut. Nothing happened in Newtown, Connecticut. There was no shooting. The school was closed. It's all a fabrication. It's lies. It's made up. And the news media won't report it. Like I mentioned, I had contacted Advanced Publications, which owns a lot of newspapers and magazines. And at the time, the owner was S.I. Newhouse. And his son, I believe it's his son, Stephen, is the owner of that company now. There was a lady that used to, she still does, she writes for Parade magazine. Her name is Marilyn Makvas Savant. She had been tested for having one of the world's highest IQ score, or maybe the world's highest IQ score. And she writes a column for Parade magazine. Parade magazine at one time was owned by Advanced Publications. And I contacted her a lot and told her no one was killed in Sandy Hook. And I think I gave her information about Flight 93 and other things. She never did anything with the information. I remember emailing Marilyn and telling her that I was contacting S.I. Newhouse's assistant on Staten Island. Marilyn lives in Manhattan with her husband, Robert Jarvik, the inventor of the artificial heart. Nothing happened. Nobody ever printed anything. Nothing ever got printed. And because of this false information that was provided through the news media, I couldn't get a fair trial. And I was being harassed by the FBI and local police departments. And the people in Newtown were getting away with this huge lie because no one would report the truth. And I was running around and calling people and not getting anyone to listen to me. Gosh, this is I'm like about 35 minutes, I think. Um, this is going to take a while to upload. It's a long video. I'll include a link in the description box to a link for my FBI file if you want to read it. I know in the first part of the report there is redacted. It's redacted quite a bit, but it's a school nurse, Sally Cox. I had called a number of times. It's the report of her going into the Newtown Police Department and reporting me, calling her. Then there's Rabbi Praver had gone into the police department and reported that I had called him 30 to 40 times, which is a lie. He also didn't provide any phone records that I'm aware of because there wasn't anything included in my file. But like I said, the FBI left out 32 pages. They didn't give me 32 pages of the report. They have 146 pages as of 2015, and they only gave me 114. John Hurlman's police report is in there. Another thing that one of the things that the FBI did is they lied. They twisted things around. After I had been arrested, I made a statement. I said that I hope police officers, shoot and kill the officers that arrested me. And the FBI twisted that around and made it sound like I was going to do that. But I've never owned, a firearm. I would never do anything like that. That would be against the law for me to do something like that. But a police officer could do something like that. They have the training to do that. And, you think that you had a law-abiding police officer wouldn't want to work alongside a police officer that was breaking the law and doing really horrible things. But yeah, I mean, the FBI would twist things around, and it's in the report. They would make stuff up that I was saying things and use that as an excuse to send the police out after me. There's some other things I could talk about. I remember before I was approached by Detective Harris, before he knocked on the door that day at my apartment, I went out for a walk early one morning to get a cup of coffee, and as I was walking down the street, I went to cross a main street, to get to where the shopping center was, and there were about 5 Portland police cars that were in a staging area in the parking lot of a Fred Meyer's store. And I remember looking over at the officers, and one of them looked away like he was ashamed about whatever. And I walked right past them. I looked right at them. And about 10 minutes later, when I was drinking my coffee, I got a phone call. I let it go to voicemail, and then a few minutes later I retrieved the voicemail, and it was the Portland police. They said that they were out in front of the house and that they wanted me to come out and talk to them. It had been that group of police cars that I walked past and looked at. It was them. They drove down the street, and there was about 5 police cars, and they parked out in front of the house and then called me and wanted me to come out. But I was across the street having a cup of coffee. That was kind of weird. But I don't know. I'm at almost 40 minutes now. I hope this uploads. This is going to take forever to upload. I'm recording this on my phone, but I don't know. I'll make another video at some other time and upload it. Just talk about some stuff. Vote for Andy Basiago 2020. Visit AndyBasiago2020.net. Andy Basiago for president. He'll release the teleportation technology after he gets after he gets elected. I've been following Andy for about 8 years now, and check out Andy's proposals. He has 100 proposals on his website. That's it. I'll talk to you later.